Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So if you remember in the first two chapters, Amos was talking to about seven nations before he addressed Israel. He even was critical about Yehuda. And then, of course, he tells Israel that they're also going to be punished, which most probably those who were listening to him in the town square were a little bit surprised to hear that, because you would expect that he's going to rebuke everybody and finally the guys at home will be the good guys, but that's not really what happened. And that left us at the end, and then he explained to them why, things that they were doing. Now we go into chapter 3. There's some issues here in chapter 3 which are unusual, but we'll start from the beginning of chapter 3. Now this is interesting because we're used to in the Tanakh, when it says Bnei Israel, it means the whole Jewish people, but here he's referring to the northern kingdom. So you always wonder, when is he talking to the northern kingdom and when is he talking to all the Jewish people? And you'll see it sort of like seems to go back and forth, but it's a little confusing because of that. Shimut hadavar zashi diber Hashem alochem bnei Israel. So listen to the word of God, O children of Israel, the whole family which I brought out of the land of Egypt. So obviously he's referring both to the northern and the southern kingdom, because it's the whole family that I brought out of Egypt. This is, by the way, the only place in the Tanakh that the Jewish people are called a family. It does say about Abraham, "V'nivruchu becha kol mishpachot ha'adama b'zarecha," that you will be blessed by all the families of the earth, or all the families of the earth will be blessed through you. But the truth is, at that time, Abraham was just a family. It was just him and his family. There was no, people of Israel yet at that point. But here, the people of Israel are called a family.
Rafi,
Now,
can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah, sure.
I just want to dedicate this shiur to Chani and I have your site for our sister Dina Chava Bat Sarah. And we want to dedicate Shisharav Lui Neshama.
Amen.
Amen.
And Refuat Kol HaChayalim HaPsuim.
Kol HaChayalim HaPsuim. Amen. Whatever, Kol Nashim, Kol Imahot. Amen.
Okay, so the unusual thing here is that the Jews are called a family. Now, I in my discussions with converts, I've always said to them, this is probably the best way to think of the Jewish people, because nowadays, Martin Buber writes in one article that he published in a book called Israel and the World, says that people have difficulty in the West, he means in the West, understanding what Jews are. Because in Christianity, for instance, Christianity is a creed, but it's not a nationhood. You can be Christian and be Japanese, you can be Christian and be Italian, and it doesn't really matter what your nationhood is or your ethnicity, because it's a religion proper. The same thing with the Islam. The Islam is a creed, but you don't have to be Arab to be Muslim. You can be Turkish and be Muslim. You can be Pakistani and be Muslim. So it's a belief system. It's not a nation. Whereas in Yahadut, you can be born a Jew and not believe it and still be considered a Jew halachically, or you can convert in even though you weren't born Jewish. So it seems to be a paradox from Western point of view. So, which according to Buber is why non-Jews have difficulty with Jews. I personally don't think that's the main reason, but it's definitely an enigma, let's say, from the point of view of those who see religions as religions, because in this sense, Judaism is not exactly a religion. Of course, the simple answer is that Judaism came into the world at a time where every nation had their own God, so that the religion and the nationality went together. Remember, the Philistines had Dagon, and Moab had Bel, and every nation really had their own religion, if you want to put it that way, their own God. That's probably why the reason very often in the Tanakh, we refer to the God as Elokei Yisrael, the God of Israel, because in antiquity, people didn't understand the concept of one God, universal. So they had to say Elokei Yisrael. But when you call the Jewish people a family, it makes much more sense, I think, to the modern ear, because a family, you either grow up in the family or you marry into the family. So you already have this concept of some people come from the outside and some people come from the inside. So I always found the idea of the mishpacha, the family, an easier way to explain this. Now that he said, I took you out of Egypt, and then only you did I know, did I love. Actually, it doesn't say love, it says did I know, yadati, from all the families of the earth. Now we would expect after this, now that God talks about the chosenness of Israel, the Navi, we would think a nice thing he's going to say. But that's not what he says. It says, only you have I known from the families of the earth, therefore I will visit upon you all your sins.
Hashem examines the righteous.
In other words, I will punish you. Exactly, like we say that the more Bikrovai Ekadesh, it says, and also in Vayikra, when the sons of Aaron died in the Mishkan, so Moshe, it is told by God, Bikrovai Ekadesh Valpnei Kolam Ekabed, I have to be sanctified by those who are close to me. I mean, the ones who are close to me, they bear greater responsibility. So you have this concept of, he says that because the Jewish people are responsible, because of the fact they were given the Torah and they had a direct relationship with God, therefore, when they sin, they have to be punished. You might say we were chosen to do something and therefore we don't do, we get punished. The child who was not chosen to take out the garbage will not get punished for not taking out the garbage. So this relationship is, it's not just being chosen, it's a responsibility, and a responsibility goes both ways. When you carry it out, so then yes, you become, so what does it say? Al babotemo tidroch, we will be able to trample over the highest hills. But unfortunately, when we don't go follow responsibility, there is also punishment. And that's what it says here. Only you did I know from all the families of the earth, therefore I will visit upon you your sins. And he's saying this to the northern kingdom, because the northern kingdom figured, well, God took us out of Egypt, so what are you talking about? We're going to be punished. We can't be punished. It doesn't work that way. We're the chosen people. So he's answering the question that are going through people's minds. How could it be that God would punish the northern kingdom? He doesn't do things like that, right? He punishes the other guys. I want to mention one other thing. In Amos, we have another interesting, I would call it ambivalent relationship to the chosenness of Israel. And this is also in the same vein. In chapter 9, you have this also. Chapter 9, I'll just read it in front of you. In front of me, I have the book. This is Haloki B'nei Kushima Temli. This is one of the Haftorah that we actually read among the Haftorot of the year. It is from chapter 9, verse 7. You know what? I'll open it up. It should be here somewhere. This is chapter 2, next chapter. Chapter 5, chapter 6, 7, 8, 9. Again, we have an unusual relationship here. What does it mean, chosenness? Okay, where did it go? Is this chapter 9? Oh, next one. This chapter. Are you not like the children of Cush to me, O children of Israel, says God? Meaning, why do you think you're so special? This is very. Now, we think we're special because God took us out of Egypt, right? Parshat Shavua, last 2 weeks. So Amos says, are you not like the children of Cush? Aren't you like the other nations, O children of Israel, says God? Did I not bring Israel out of Egypt, but I also took the Philistines out of Kaftor, which is Crete, and Aram from Kir. So I did that too. Okay, they didn't know it, but I move the nations around all the time. Behold, the eyes of God are on the sinful kingdom, and I will destroy it from the face of the earth, but I will not destroy the house of Jacob. So the Navi is saying, don't think that because you have the special relationship, God cannot bring iniquity. He can. He can destroy the northern kingdom, but he won't destroy the whole Jewish people. A lot of them Farshim say he destroys the leadership or the kingdom, but not necessarily the people. But anyhow, so Amos in that sense is quite, I guess, as being a prophet of the northern kingdom is also not a simple thing to be. I have to admit that. I'm sure it was a very difficult thing to do. So, okay, we'll go back to chapter 2. Basically, in this chapter, he's trying to explain to the people of the northern kingdom. Oh, by the way, I noticed Amos lives during the time of Yerovam II. So Yerovam II, by the way, is from 778 to 748. Now, that's his kingdom. Now, remember that the 10 tribes were thrown into exile 722 before the Common Era. So even the end of Yerovam II's kingdom finishes at 748, 749 before the Common Era, which is a good 25 years before the northern kingdom will be exiled by Sancheriv, the king of Ashur. So the prophecies of Amos are happening more or less during the time of Yeshayahu and Chizkiyahu, quite well earlier, even earlier than this, slightly before Yeshayahu. So V'shalachti eish b'Moab. So he says, I will send fire into Moab, and it will consume the palaces of Krayot. No, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong chapter. Wondering what happened here with Moab. We're in 3. Okay. So only did you I love from the peoples of the earth, but I will visit upon you your iniquities. Now, will 2 walk together unless they agreed? We're going to have 7 verses here of analogies. When people decide to walk together, doesn't that happen because they agreed to walk together, to take a walk together on a promenade? When a lion roars in the forest, would he roar if he had no prey? If a young lion, a kfir in Hebrew, let out a cry from his den, would he cry if something was not taken from him? Actually, no, unless he was taking some, excuse me, it's better in Hebrew. Right, if he didn't prey on something, if he didn't find something to eat. Would a bird fall on a trap, like a net, on the ground, unless it has a snare? In other words, when the bird lands on the ground, would it be trapped if there wasn't a trap there? And would a net, it's actually not a net, a pach is, these metal things that clamp down when you step in the wrong place? That's really a pach. It's a metal piece. There's actually a picture of it here, which clamps down on the animal when it steps on part of it. Part of the clamp is under the ground, so the animal doesn't see it, and they walk on top of it, and it's like a snare. It gets them. So when a bird lands on the ground, right, would it be would it get stuck if it didn't have a snare? And if the snare, and if the pach, if this trap did come up, well, it would come up because something was caught in it. If a shofar was blown in the city, would people not tremble with fear? Because that means that a war is about to break out. And ve'am lo yecharadu, would people not shake with fear? And if there's evil in the city, could it be that God did not cause it? This is something I want to talk about too, but let's keep going. God does nothing unless he reveals the secrets to his servants, the prophets. A lion has roared, who shall not fear? God has spoken, who shall not prophesy? Okay. So basically, Amos is saying to the northern kingdom, you are living in a time where it doesn't look like things are going bad. But I'm telling you, your actions are creating something which is going to happen. That's what he's saying in the Northern Kingdom. And it's going to happen possibly in your lifetimes. So it's time to take things to heart and change your ways, or else this is going to happen. It says, because everything is planned. Now, it looks like also that some of the things which are going to be mentioned in the next chapter were actually did take place already in the Northern Kingdom, and they just thought, okay, this is a skirmish. This is a one-time thing. And Amos is saying, no, these are signs to tell the people, these are warning signs. They happen as warnings, etc. Now, two things I want to talk about here. So do you understand what's happening here? There are a couple, all these analogies that everything has a cause. People do agree to go on a promenade, it's because they planned it. Lion roars in the forest, he has prey. A young lion roars, he caught something. A bird is trapped in a net with a snare, that's because he stepped on something and somebody put the snare there. Snare comes up because something was trapped in it. A shofar is blown in the city, people are fearsome. There's evil in the city, God did it. These are the 7 things. 7 is a number which comes back all the time. And then one more. For God does nothing unless he reveals his secret to the prophets. Now, this is interesting. It's as if God is giving prophecy and the prophets have to pick it up. Meaning God gives out prophecy, it sounds like, to all the prophets when something is about to go wrong. And the ones who hear it, they're the ones who mention it. Now, today we don't live in prophecy, so therefore we don't hear these things, but maybe we see signs of things that are happening sometimes, and we have to pay attention to the signs. Now, I want to say something else here. It says, when there is evil in the city, can it be that God has not done it? In what sense do we attribute evil directly to God? Isn't there free will? I would say normally there's a difference between the individual and the collective. The individual, of course, if something comes upon you, it says already in the Talmud in Brachot, if somebody sees that things are going bad for them, you fashpesh b'ma'asav. Check to see, maybe you did something wrong and try to amend your ways. And then it says, if you can't find anything specific, so attribute it to lack of study Torah and try to study Torah more. So a person could do that to themselves on an individual basis. I can say, okay, my life is not going well. I want to improve myself. Let me think what I can do to improve myself, to make me worthy of a better life. But you cannot do that to somebody else. You can't say, well, your life is not doing well because obviously you're sinning. This was the message of the book of Job. All Job's friends, all of Eov's friends were saying to him, you know what? Your life is going bad because obviously you're not a good person. You're planning bad things. You're just pretending to be saintly, etc. And if you remember the end of the book of Eov, Hashem in the whirlwind basically says to all the friends of Eov that they're all mistaken. There's nothing wrong with Eov. So when it comes to the individual can scrutinize themselves and try to take stock themselves, but nobody can look at another person and say it's because of this. If that person comes to you to ask your opinion of what things they can do to try to improve their ways, and you know them well, since they asked you, yes, but to go around and tell somebody, that's a chutzpah. That's why it says in Pirkei Avot, we do not know why the righteous suffer and why the evil seem to prosper. And Yirmiyahu says that specifically. Why is it that the evil prosper? So both the Nevi'im and Chazal say we don't know on the individual basis why a person suffers and what the plan is behind it. And therefore you can never tell a person it's because of this or because of that, and it's really not our place. Even when it comes to Tochacha, there was a machloket between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon, if you're even allowed to give Tochacha to somebody. It's like, who are you to give Tochacha to reprove somebody? If they're a friend of yours and you know for sure they're going to take it the right way, yeah, most people say that's okay. Ramban, though, Nachmanides is on Vayikra says on the pasuk, "Hocheach tochiach et amitecha velo tisa alav chet," which means reprove and rebuke your friend, your fellow, and do not take a sin upon him. Ramban explains it differently. He says, theoretically, you can try to rebuke somebody, but if you think there's a slight chance that they won't listen to you, don't say anything, because then they'll do it on purpose, and then you're causing them to sin. Ramban says. So when it comes to reproving and tochacha, there is a lot of material among Chazal to be very careful about tochacha. You have to make sure that you're talking to somebody who's going to see it in a good light, or else just keep your mouth shut. And especially if you don't know how to say it the right way. But I would say that when Amos is talking here in the way he's talking, it's because he's talking to the collective. There's a difference between what happens to the collective and what happens to the individual. There is more hashgacha, if you want to say that, among the collective of Israel.
Isn't that a Maimonides perspective? I mean, it's not.
It seems to be a Tanakhic perspective. In the Tanakh, you can see that when the people go in the right way, Hashem gives us bracha. And when we go in the wrong way, there seem to be klalot. But not everybody goes in the wrong way. There are always tzaddikim in every generation. And not just 36. The 36 are you might say, the prime ones. But there are a lot of tzaddikim in every generation that don't deserve this. And they get caught because of the sins of the generation. That happens. So there's a difference between the collective and the individual. And I think that here what's happening is that Amos is turning to the collective and saying when things happen, the dance between God and Israel is going a little bit sour sometimes. But you can improve it. You can always improve it. Tshuva works even at the last minute. It's the famous story of Chizkiyahu Hamelech. Yeshayahu comes over to Chizkiah and says in Sefer Melachim, he says, "Tzav lebeitcha, write your will. Ki meita ta v'lo tichya, you're going to die." And the Gemara goes into a whole discussion. Why is he going to die? And so Yeshayahu says to him, because you didn't have any children. And Chizkiah said, well, I didn't have children because I knew in Ruach HaKodesh that my son was going to be an evil king and kill people in Jerusalem. Why would I want to bring a soul like that into the world? So Yeshayahu says to him, according to Chazal and Brachot, says, look, you're not supposed to look into the secrets of the upper worlds. You got to just do what you have to do, and whatever happens, happens. So it says that Chizkiah davened, and God granted him another 15 years. And because Chizkiah said to Yeshayahu, Ben Amos, klach nevuatcha v'tzei, son of Amos, which is Yeshayahu, stop your nevuah and leave, because I have a tradition from my father's house, meaning since King David. Acher afilu cherev chada munachat lo al tzavarosh ben adam. Even if a sharp sword is on your neck, you shall not be despaired and not think that you can't, there's not compassion. Meaning you can still daven and be saved, even if everything looks doomed. And it says that he davened, he got another 15 years. And then, of course, he had a son, and that son was Menashe, and was in Egypt. And it says he filled Jerusalem from one side to the other with blood. That's a very cruel dictator. However, according to Divrei Yomim, Menashe, at the end of his life, did tshuva and decided to mend his ways at the end of his life. And the Talmud says about Menashe that when he did tshuva, the angel said, how can you accept somebody like this, like tshuva, for tshuva? And then God had to make like a hole under his kisei hakavod to allow Menashe to have tshuva and to be accepted. So, yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So we're saying that Amos actually wrote this.
The actual editors of all the Treyasar were Anshe Knesset Hagadola, according to the Gemara and Baba Batra Yudal. It means that the Anshe Knesset Hagadola obviously had these manuscripts and they put them into book form.
So
the Gemara discusses who actually wrote their book and who edited their book. It's not always the same. With Yirmiyahu, we know that Yirmiyahu, we actually know who his editor was because his name is Baruch ben Neriah, who was a scribe who worked with him, and his name is in the book. And Baruch says specifically, Yirmiyahu spoke, and I wrote everything down in the book. So you know, that's why when Chazal say Yirmiyahu wrote his book, it's because we know who wrote the book. He had a scribe, his name was Baruch. However, for instance, Chazal say that Chizkiah, the contemporary of Yeshayahu, wrote the book of Yeshayahu, which means edited.
Okay, so they transcribe what these prophets were saying to the people. And I was looking at number 7 as like a marketing tool for the keep themselves relevant. They're saying for the Lord does nothing unless it's first revealed to his prophet. So like it
means that God always gives what it means is God always gives a warning.
Oh, that's what it means? Okay.
Yeah. And the prophets are there to warn the people. The question is, what happens when you don't have prophets? Then I would say it has to be the Chachamim have no choice but try to look for signs to warn the people if something's happening.
Okay.
But Rafi, during the whole time of you have Nevi'im, it was always the same message over and over again. It's always doom and gloom. If you don't do this, so do that. So what's the difference between any of them?
Well, not all, first of all, it's not all doom and gloom, because even Yirmiyahu, which a lot of his chapters are about doom and gloom, he talks about Shivat Zion and that the Jews will come back. And
But
Hashem
after the
says to
doom and
Rachel,
gloom.
Hashem says to Rachel,
After.
yeah. So, well, remember, it was. He also says that the Babylonian exile will only be 70 years. That's better than 2,000. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what happened. We did come back under
Some.
Ezra, Nehemiah, Zerubbabel after approximately 70 years. And according to Chazal, Chashverosh, the wrong calculation, and all these different things. But of course, the problem was a lot of the Jews didn't come back after the 70 years.
Right.
They got used to Bavel. And in Haggai, the people are saying, like, this is not time to build God's. Haggai, it rebukes the people for saying it's not time to build Hashem's house.
So
like,
nothing
what do you mean
changed.
it's not
Nothing
time?
changed.
Right? In other words, the Navi is telling them to do it, and they're saying it's not time.
Right.
This is not what we expected. We expected, like, you see at Mitzrayim, there'll be a Moshe Rabbeinu, and you see many flowers. Haggai says, excuse me, this is the time. Koresh said that you can go build it up, go do it. And most of the Jews did not. In the book of Ezra, they list the names of the families who came. And I mean, there were so few, It's like, it's like people today, okay, we have the state of Israel. Nothing changed. We can still be in the Galut. What do you mean nothing changed? What are you talking about? When in the last 2,000 years that we had sovereignty in the land of Israel? So you can't say nothing changed unless you want to be blind. Yeah. So this also, the other Parshanim also understand it this way. But the idea of the prophets, God will always do something with a warning. That's the idea. Always with a warning. The Talmud even says that a person can't die unless they had a chait. Because death is a punishment, and you have to have a punishment for something. So the Talmud says also in Baba Batra, there are 3 people who died because of the Chet Adam Kadmon, of the first Adam and Eve, because they themselves were sinless. And unfortunately, they were mortal, so they were sin. That's why the Be'etyoch Shel Nachash, because of the serpent, that's why these 3, one of them was David HaMelech's father, Yishai. Supposedly, he was a completely saintly individual. I think another one was Amram, Moshe's father. There were 3 people mentioned by Babach. I have to look up again who it was. So so there's right. So he says there's always a warning, and Amos says, "I'm giving you the warning." Now there were prophets also who talked about nice things. Yonah ben Amittai made a prophecy to Yeravam, this king, that the northern kingdom would get back the Gilad, which is that piece of land just east of the Jordan River, which I told you belonged to Israel and very often was attacked from Aram and other places. He said, you will get it back in a war, and they did. So you even have northern kingdom prophets who said good things. Yeshayahu has a lot of good things to say. By the way, he also has both Yirmiyahu and Yeshayahu have very difficult prophecies for Bavel, for Mitzrayim. And as we saw right here, Amos has a lot of difficult things to say to 5 different nations. Or I think it was 6. And then of course, Yehuda also. So, yeah, so they say good and bad things. But in general, the point of the prophet is to tell people what to do. If you have a prophet and you listen to them, things can work out. Just, I think that, I don't know, sometimes we get stubborn in our ways. I think that's, okay, it's part 1, 2, this chapter. Hashmiel Armonot Ba'ashdod. Now, after he said that God gives warnings, he's saying now, announce in the palaces of Ashdod and the palaces of the land of Egypt and say, gather on the mountains of the Shomron, and you will see great confusion within it, and people oppressed in its midst. Yeah, this one I find actually very disturbing. I'll tell you the way it's usually explained. Meaning the prophet is turning to the people in Ashdod, which is the Plishtim, and the Egyptians, and saying, stand up high on the mountains of Shomron, and you will see that the people are confused because of the Ashukim. There's oppression. They're not ethical. They're fighting among themselves. So they'll be easy prey. Unfortunately, that's exactly what happened to us before October 6th. That's why I find this pasuk very disturbing. Yeah. It's, the people suffer very often because of minority groups who create calamities and pretend that everybody believes what they believe. It's a problem. It's a problem. We have to gather the people together. I believe that we need time now. We can't have elections now. We need a year or 2 because new parties will form. There are enough people who are fed up with the politicians and the people who've been leading things. I'm absolutely convinced there will be new parties formed for the next year or 2. And that's why it's very important to push off the elections for a year or 2 and not to have the same honchos back who were before, whether it's the coalition or the opposition. Because I think a lot of people are going to be replaced in the next 2 years. Because a lot of people have woken up, and we need those people who have woken up to take leadership positions.
Says Prophet Rafi. Says the Prophet Rafi.
Yeah, the problem is that people want Bibi out, so what do you do in the interim?
No, certain people want Bibi out, and they've been shouting again and again and again and again. And when you shout again and again, everybody's convinced at a certain point, as Goebbels said, people think it's obviously right. People say it again and again. We basically need 2 years. The war will take another few months, but we need time for people, because these groups are going to form, and they have the right to form. And they will knock out a lot of the existing parties, or just take them over, which is nothing wrong with that either. And I think we don't want the war to be wasted. Now the people have woken up. It's really a pivotal time in our history. A lot of good can come out of this. And if we let all the old honchos take over, it'll ruin a very important opportunity. That's what I'm saying. And the old honchos are very active because they really don't want to lose their places in society. Yeah. I'm not a prophet. Sometimes if you try to use wisdom, you can figure out things that prophets can't figure out. Because remember, the prophet only knows what God told him. But if you can figure out a situation, you can figure out a situation. You don't have to be a prophet for that. So what I'm saying, I think lots of people are saying. I'm not a lone wolf in that sense. Anyhow, Yud. The people of the northern kingdom didn't know how to do the right thing, God said. They store up violence and they plunder in their palaces. Meaning they're violent, and they, by the way, Hamas, it says here, have Hamas in their Hamas, of course, means theft. Hamas v'shod. They steal from people and they keep it in their palaces. So, they bring destruction on themselves. Therefore, Ko amar Hashem Elokim, tsar usviva aretz. There will be a lot of adversaries around the land. V'hored mimchem uzech, it will take away your strength. V'navozu armonotayach, and your palaces will be spoiled, which means they will steal the stuff from your palaces. Ko amar Hashem, just as a shepherd saves from the lion's mouth 2 legs or a cartilage of an ear. What does that mean? A shepherd is working for somebody else. So if the sheep is attacked by a lion, and all that's left of that sheep is a piece of the ear and a half a leg, the shepherd will keep the piece of the ear and half the leg to show to the owner, it's not my fault, it was a lion who attacked that sheep. So don't think I stole it. God says, just as a shepherd saves from the lion's mouth 2 legs and the cartilage of an ear to prove that he's innocent and he didn't steal anything, so will the children of Israel dwelling into the Shomron be saved in the corner of a bed or the corner of a couch, which means most of the people will be saved, but there will be a lot of destruction in the Shomron. Shimu vehidu bebeit Yaakov. So therefore, tell the house of Jacob, Elokei Tzvaot, because on the day that I punish Israel for its iniquities, I will also punish the altars of Beit El. If you remember the centers of worship of the northern kingdom of Avodah Zarah, their idolatrous worship, was in Beit El and in Dan. That's where they put up these 2 golden calves, and these became the center of religious worship in the northern kingdom. So on the day I visit the iniquities of Israel, I will also visit the altars of Beit El to destroy them. And the horns of the altar shall be cut off and shall fall to the earth. And I will smite the winter house and the summer house, because all the VIPs of the northern kingdom had 2 houses, one for the summer, one for the winter, because they could afford to have a summer cottage and a regular house. And I will smite the winter house and the summer house, and the ivory houses shall be lost, meaning the rich, again, have houses that have ivory, and the great houses shall end. In other words, God's saying, I will punish the rich and the ones who had the influence. That is chapter 3. So chapter 3 basically is continuation of basically what he's saying is going to happen to Israel if people don't change their ways. And he's basically blaming them for what we call mitzvot, averot ben adam lechavero, for not, for theft, for oppression. Like Yeshayahu also says. We read on the Haftorah of Yom Kippur from Yeshayahu. Yeshayahu says, is this the fast day that I want? To bend over like a bulrush and to put a sackcloth? I don't want a day like that. I want you to stop oppressing people. Let the oppressed go free. This is what I want. I want a better society. And then you won't even have to have a fast day. Chazal, in general, it says, Chazal say about the generation of, what was it, in Breshit, the generation which started idol worship. I forget which one it was. So it says that even if that generation would be Oved Avodah Zarah, even if the Jews would worship idols, but there would be love among them in unity, so God says, I would spare them. Because it's always, a person can always say, look, Frumkeit, I don't understand Frumkeit, but stealing you understand, right? Murder you understand, oppression you understand. So there's no excuse for those things. So the things that there's no excuse for, that's why it says also about Dora Mabul, Lo nechtam gzar dinam ela ala gezel, that their main punishment was not because of Avodah Zarah, but because they were stealing from one another. That everybody understands. It's innate within the human being. We understand things like that. What's not yours, don't take. The life which is not yours, also don't take. So we know things like that. So we get punished for things that are obvious. God is a little bit more merciful when it comes to things which are ben adam lamakom, because that he's willing to forgive. But what we do to other people, he's not so crazy about that. It's like on Yom Kippur. The Mishnah in Yoma, and Rambam brings it down Hilchot Tshuva. On Yom Kippur, if we did something against God, we can ask for vidui, ask for forgiveness, and God will forgive. Itzu Marshal Yom Kippur Mechaper, which means the very essence of the day of Yom Kippur is Mechaper. But if we hurt somebody, or we slandered somebody, or we gossiped about somebody, we have to ask that individual for mechila, or else it doesn't work. After we've asked that individual for mechila, then we do vidui and ask for Shem for forgiveness. So the things avirot ben adam chavero are much more serious. Rav Chaim Volozhin brings the name of the Vilna Gaon. I put it at the end of my book. My book on Chaim Volozhin. It's the last. I put it at the end. It says that the Vilna Gaon said that the main avodat Hashem that a person is supposed to do in this world is to be very careful about the averot ben adam lechavero, transgressions between a person and another person. Try not to hurt people. That already is going to put you on a madrega that most people are not on. So basically, the Navi is not even talking about. I mean, at the end, he says that God's going to destroy Beit El, which is the center of their idol worship. But he's not even talking about that. He's blaming them for the things that they should have understood. The oppression and the stealing and the rich taking from the poor and things like that and abusing their power. Those are the things that Shomron is being blamed for in chapter 3. Yeah. Okay, we can go a little bit further into chapter 4. Let's see what he says here is in the introduction, chapter 4. Okay, chapter 4 is now going into detail of oppression that is taking place in the northern kingdom. Amos is going to go to details of things where people are doing and saying, okay, you think you guys are so righteous, I'm going to give you examples of things that you're doing. So this is the type of things that nobody wants to hear. We'll just read a little bit of it. Shimu hadavar hazeh parot habashan. Listen to my words, the cows of the Bashan on the Mount Samaria. Who are the cows of the Bashan? The cows of the Bashan are the rich women of the aristocracy of the Shomron. He calls them the cows of the Bashan, which is a very, of course, not a very way to talk to them. Because remember, in antiquity, women who were very plump were considered more beautiful. So the rich women would actually eat a lot to make themselves look more plump because that was considered beautiful. Even at the time of the Talmud, which is generations later, the Talmud says that women used to wear chokers to make them look like they had more, like more basar, to make them look fatter, because the choker makes it look like you're bigger. That's what. By the way, in Arab culture, it's also like that. The Arabs in general like big women. So in antiquity, women would, if women had the money, so they would eat more and they would be larger. So that's why he calls them the cows of the Bashan, because cows are big animals. Yeah, in the Shomron. Who oppress the poor, oppress the needy, who say to their lords, meaning their husbands, or the lords could also be Adonehem, Aviu v'nishteh, or might be also to the other aristocrats who are in charge of these poor people, bring that we may drink. Let me see how he translate that. Oh, here he says, Ladonehem is to their husbands. In other words, they say to their husbands, bring us more money so that we can drink more. So they push their husbands also to oppress more and to steal more from the people because they want more and more. Who cares about these people? So he's describing here a very callous upper society in the Shomron, that the rich seem to care nothing about the people. I mean, it's quite, a very difficult description. Nishba Hashem Elokim b'kodsho. God is sworn by his holy, which probably means holy abode, but he doesn't even say that. Kinei yamim ba'im aleichem. Days will come upon you. V'nisa etchem b'tzinot. Here it says you'll be carried on shields. V'achorechem b'sirot duga, and then in the fishing boats. Here he translates tzinot. Here he says, here he claims that tzinot is actually ropes. So in this translation, he translates tzinot as ropes. In other words, you'll be carried with ropes because the slaves are rounded up. They're bound by ropes, and then they're carried onto wagons and taken away, which is basically what happened to the Northern Kingdom when they were exiled by Sanherib. They were taken like slaves, but they were all exiled. So the days will be coming, you shall be taken by ropes and into fishing boats to take you away. Upratzim teitzena isha negda. Now, I'm not so sure about that, which means, again, that the enemies will break through your walls. And so all these women who are running away will just run through the holes in the walls. And not even one will go together. There'll be so many holes in the walls. In other words, all these walls that protected you, your fortresses, will be breached, and you'll be able, and everybody will run through the walls because they're going to want to run away from the enemy. Yeah, vishlachtena harmona, which means the enemy shall push you away. Now there's a question what a harmona actually means. Some people say that the women would be captives and taken as harlots. Again, it's very disturbing because it sounds a little bit like October 7th. So yeah, what Amos is saying. But so we have to be happy that it happened on a small way, not in a large way. I mean, I know we think that 1,200 is a large way, but yeah. So, yeah. Okay, I think this has been enough, I think, details of destruction and for today. So, but I want to say that the Amos, like a lot of the prophecies, his whole last chapter, despite the way he starts it, is all about Nehemiah coming back. And Yeshayahu and Yechezkel, and I think even Zechariah, even talked about the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom coming together. Take one branch for Ephraim and one branch for Yehuda, and they will be one, and the two branches will be one in your hand. Yeshayahu says in chapter 11. And another place says, Lebeit Yisrael, Lebeit Yehuda. So there's even a prophecy that the northern kingdom will come back. Now the question is,
nowadays also, people go
the
looking
question
for a
is,
shot.
right, so the question is, when they say the northern kingdom come back, are they referring to during the Second Temple period, which means there were some people of the northern kingdom who did come back under Yirmiyahu, according to Divrei Yamim, and they, of course, mixed in with the rest of the Jews. So some of them did come back. Remember, also, there was always intermarriage between the tribes. You know, women would go into one tribe would go from one tribe to another. So there always was a mixture. Or, this is a machloket in Sanhedrin. Will the 10 tribes come back or not? So there is a very significant opinion that says the 10 tribes come back. Then the question is, will it happen, or did it happen in a small way? Like, for instance, are the Beta Yisrael, the Ethiopians, are they left over from the 10 tribes? Like Eldad Hadani thought they were from the tribe of Dan. The Jews in Kashmir, who, who were brought to the Shomron, are they actually from the Shomron originally? Those are the Jews, what do they call them? The Bnei Menashe. Are they left over? It's hard to know. Lots and lots of time have gone by, and it's very hard to answer a question like this. The Talmud in Kiddushin has a very interesting question. Talmud says, if a Jewish man betroths a non-Jewish woman, are they married? Talmud says, of course not. We don't recognize, Halakha doesn't recognize a marriage like that. Then Talmud says, yeah, but what if that woman is actually descended from the 10 tribes? And then what do you do? And they didn't have an answer because there are a lot of them out there, the 10 tribes. So it says, Lo zazu misham, they didn't move from there until they made a decree that the non-Jews, that even from the 10 tribes, we consider them like non-Jews because it's been too much time. They would have to do giyur. But it was a real problem because theoretically, the marriage would be a marriage if the person can prove they're from the 10 tribes. If you could do so, of course. Today it's 2,500 years, but in the time of the Mishnah, it was only 500 years. So I guess it was only 700 years. But even today, when you think, Jews left over in Spain from the Inquisition 500 years ago, there are Marrano communities. You have Marrano communities in Portugal. You have in Monterrey, Mexico. You have in the island of Mallorca in Spain. You do have these Marrano communities. You have in Brazil families who claim they're from Conversos, which is interesting for 500 years. One time I was only twice in Spain. Both times I went to Valencia. And there was a very tiny Jewish community, maybe 200 people there at the time. And there was an Israeli guy. Wherever you go, there's always an Israeli. His name was Yossi. And he decided to open up a kosher part of the grocery store of El Corte Inglés, which is one of these fancy department stores in Valencia. So, which was very good because as soon as I came there, there was a kosher section where he brought in stuff from France. So I met the guy and I said to him, why did you open up a kosher section? He says, well, he actually told me a story. He said, I go there every day, pass by to see who's there. And very often you see people, they see a Magen David and they look right and left. And then they put it quickly into their their trolley and they zip off. He says, these are people descended from, conversos, from the Jews, the crypto Jews from Spain. They like things with Magen Davids on them, but they're still afraid that somebody might be looking. He says, these are part of the people who are buying. I mean, for me, it was good. I didn't meet anybody else there among the Jewish community who was that frum who would have kosher, but maybe there were. I didn't meet everybody only.
I find it interesting that amongst the the Dati Leumi, we're happy to embrace people who we think are from, like, the 10 tribes, intermarry.
Yes.
I don't think that that's true for Haredim, but in our community, I think it's a very nice thing that people, find it as a positive thing.
Yeah, I think it's also not true among certain segments of the secular society, because when the Rabbanim Rashim, Rabbi Shapira and Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu were Rabbanim Rashim, they considered the Ethiopian Jews as Jews, based on also Rabbi Tzvi Cook before that, who also considered them as Jews. But the Jewish agency had refused to bring them to Israel for years. It was actually the pressure of the Rabbanim Rashim to bring them to Israel. That you'll never hear from anybody.
Right, right. You only hear
Because
negative.
now, I have to say, in support of the Jewish agency, they were afraid it would open up a Pandora's box. Because once you start bringing one group from Africa, there are many groups in Africa who claim to have Jewish roots. And most of them, it's fictitious. So I understand the problem. But the Ethiopian Jews really had a Masoret for hundreds of years that we knew about. It's not like, somebody
as we do Shabbat or something, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, they had a Masorah for many, for
Mhm.
hundreds of years before that. As I said, El Dada Dani, hundreds of years ago, talked about them. And so
Mhm.
that was so the Rabbanim Rashim had a very big part of that. But I'm saying within Israeli society, not just the Haredim, you have other people too who look down on people. It exists within Israeli society.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, I find that also people who see Jews as an ethnicity, they
Yeah.
look down on converts too. They don't consider them Jews.
For sure, for
I
sure.
always say to my potential converts who don't look so Jewish, I said, the more you keep your frumkeit, the more people will accept you, even if they're not religious. Because the more you care about it, they'll realize, that you care about it. Okay, dear friends. So on this
Thank you.
sour note in Amos, we have to get to the good stuff quick.
I hope so, yeah.
It's depressing.
It is a little, well, remember, he is talking to the Northern Kingdom, but there are a lot of things we can learn about the Northern Kingdom. A lot of things that happened in the Northern Kingdom happened in the Second Temple period, under the Hashmonaim, by the way. There was an article written just a week ago by a colleague of mine at Bar Ilan in the they call it Madei Eretz Yisrael, the Land of Israel department. They don't call it archaeology because the other universities were not willing for Bar Ilan to have an archaeology department. They had to call it the Land of Israel department. So they wrote a whole thing about what we can learn from the Second Temple period of how to solve our problems today. That's Eyal Regev. Thought it was a good article in Ivrit. Okay, shalom to everyone.